Final Fantasy VII Remake came out back in 2020. Planning for this remake of one of the most iconic video games of all time in Final Fantasy VII actually began all the way back in 2005. But Square Enix is no stranger to taking their time to complete projects in an attempt to produce the best possible product.
Yeah, okay, that is something I do now. I do magic, talk to sentient cuffs, kill jacked up beasts. You know what? I'll probably fly next.
I'll be honest, Final Fantasy VII Remake is one of my favorite video games of all time, so this video might be a little bit biased. But I'm gonna cover what I think you should know about the game while keeping this video spoiler free. The original Final Fantasy VII came out all the way back in 1997. That's actually the year I was born. It ended up becoming one of, if not the most iconic JRPGs ever, and for good reason. This video game was such a leap forward for both Square Enix as a company and for gaming in general. It was the first Final Fantasy game to feature 3D graphics. The open world was absolutely massive, and the story is legendary and features some wild plot twists that you would rarely see in gaming today. It actually took 3 discs to fit this game on the PlayStation 1. Now when Final Fantasy VII Remake was announced, I was absolutely stoked. Growing up in the early 2000s MySpace era, this game was everywhere. From music video montages to mainstream news outlets, Final Fantasy VII became part of the culture growing up. But over the years, Square Enix has managed to taint the legacy a bit by attempting to absolutely milk the hell out of this game. The latest attempt of this is their new mobile game, Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. We all know the reason mobile games suck, and let's just say this game is full of them. So as Final Fantasy VII Remake came closer to releasing, I began to get a little bit worried that this would be the case, especially after hearing that Final Fantasy VII Remake was only going to be about the first third of the Final Fantasy VII story. Luckily for me, I was wrong. Final Fantasy VII Remake ended up bringing the world of Midgar to life in an entirely new way. It's a roughly 40-hour experience that doesn't feel dry for a single moment. Well, except for that stupid crate stacking part. It ended up becoming my absolute favorite combat system in any game, perfectly blending real-time action RPG combat with turn-based elements. In this game, Square Enix managed to take the worst and slowest section of the original Final Fantasy VII and bring it to life in a way that holds up to modern gaming standards. The only real problem with this game is exactly what I just mentioned. It's just a small section of the original Final Fantasy VII. When you call a game a remake, there is a certain expectation from the consumer that they will be getting a remake of a game, not a remake of a small portion of a game. I'm not kidding when I say the original Final Fantasy VII starts to get really good towards the end of the parts you play in Final Fantasy VII Remake. After the game released, many people expected that Square Enix would make a part 2 in order to tell the rest of the story, but shortly after that, they announced that it will actually be released as a trilogy over the next decade, and that really frustrates me. As someone who loves this story, I believe it should be told as a whole, not in small parts with cliffhanger endings that force you to buy the next chapter. As much as I believe Square Enix did an exceptional job of remaking the first part of this game, I don't like how they went about releasing it. It's exactly what I said earlier, milking an iconic title for the most possible money. And as a side note, that shouldn't impact whether you play Final Fantasy VII Remake or Rebirth. I'm hearing a lot of rumors of Square Enix making Rebirth sort of a reimagining of the original story with changes to key points in the plot. And for the love of God, I hope they don't actually do that. I just want to play a remake of the original story, not a completely different version of it. So here's the thing, if you've never had a chance to experience the original Final Fantasy VII due to the game feeling pretty dated by today's standards, and you want to get as close to that experience as possible, I highly recommend going back and playing Final Fantasy VII Remake before Rebirth comes out in February. Especially with the game now having a full PS5 version that features 60 frames per second and looks gorgeous, there is no reason not to. However, if you don't care about knowing the whole backstory and just want to try out the game, or you don't have the money to go and play both, the second and third parts of the original Final Fantasy VII are far better than the first chapter, leading me to believe that Rebirth will actually be a lot better than 2020's Remake. And with the hopefully untrue rumors that Square Enix is going to change crucial parts in the storyline in Rebirth, who even cares if you know the whole Final Fantasy VII story, as it might be irrelevant when it comes to this modern version of the game. All I can say is I do really recommend this trilogy. Despite some of the mixed reviews, aside from a few Soulsborne titles, Final Fantasy VII Remake was my favorite game released on the PS4. I think it's a far better title than Final Fantasy XVI. Even though it's just a small section of the original Final Fantasy VII, it feels like a more complete game to me. And since it's available on PC now, there's almost no reason not to go play it. So I hope you enjoyed this video and it helped you out a bit with your upcoming gaming decisions. Let me know down below if you think Square Enix will change key parts of the story and how you feel about it if they do. Am I crazy for thinking they should be faithful to the original? Anyways, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Eventually I will have a long detailed review of Final Fantasy XVI, explaining why I have mixed feelings about that game, so be on the lookout for it. Until next time, thanks for watching and take care.